Okay, we're back. It is week 9, episode 9 of the Hockey Cards Gong Show podcast. Welcome to all the hockey card collectors out there. Even if you're not a collector and just interested in hockey cards and getting in the hobby, welcome too. If you accidentally clicked on the wrong podcast, hey, we'll take it. How's it going, Troy?
Yep, we need all the listeners we can get.
Okay, Troy. So do you remember a few weeks ago when we had a little bit of concern, being somewhat new podcasters, that once the hockey season ended, would there be anything for us to talk about?
I do remember that, and I remember thinking, well, it's going to be summer. There probably won't be, there'll be some stuff to talk about, but not a lot. And boy, was I wrong.
Holy cow. We could have made this a 4-hour show if we would have wanted to. It has been a heck of a week in the NHL. For us, it's great. Just means there's lots of exciting things to talk about. A lot of exciting things, not just in the hobby, but of course, the NHL impacting what's going to happen with hockey cards as well. I guess from there, should we roll into our game plan?
Definitely. So on today's show, we will start with the NHL Draft and look at some of the exciting happenings that occurred on draft day. We will then look at NHL news, and holy crap, is there some crazy news out of the NHL, and especially news that affects our favorite team and favorite player. Next, we will look at the free agency season, free agent players, and what does this mean for values of certain players regarding free agency. We are then joined by Chris McGill from Card Ladder and talk to Chris about the overall sports card market, along with focusing on the hockey card market and how it is performing. This was a really fantastic discussion, and we gained a lot of great insight from Chris, and we hope you do too. So please stick around and listen to that interview. It has a lot of really good information. Finally, we'll end the show with the trifecta of hobby news, new product releases, and our personal pickups and or sales. So it's another great show lined up, and let's get started with the NHL Draft. So Josh, question for you. Did you watch the NHL Draft?
I did. Most of it.
So my key takeaways was it was soap opera TV, and ESPN had to be loving it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had all the intrigue. You had the fans, like you, I think, had put in our show prep, booing Bettman to the draft order not going exactly as people had planned. And all in all, again, I think in the theme that we've been talking about and how to create more interest and promote the game, it kind of turned out perfectly. Maybe not for Shane Wright, but for the game, I think it was a good night.
I absolutely enjoyed Bettman getting booed. I thought it was fantastic. The Montreal fans were savage when he came out. He had to expect it, but man, they did not let up on him. And you could see kind of the shock in his face as he kind of looked around, but he had to know it was coming. And by, 5 minutes in the draft, he was kind of egging the crowd on. So that was really enjoyable to watch. And the Montreal fans definitely brought the heat to that.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Who do you think's more hated,
Sure.
Roger Goodell from the NFL or Bettman in the NHL?
Probably Bettman, because the problem Bettman has is he's not a hockey guy at all. He came from the NBA. I think a lot of hockey fans and hockey people just don't like him. They think he doesn't care about the game, or he doesn't maybe not care about the game, but he doesn't know about the game. He is a businessman, and that is his first job is to make the owners money. So I kind of think that Bettman's a little more hated by the hockey community than Goodell by the football community.
Well, I'm even getting a little bit out of my purview of knowledge here, so I'm walking on thin ice acknowledging that here, but has he really done that great of a job making the owners money?
Well, he at least got the TV deal done this year, or the national TV deal. Here's my thing. He must have done a good enough job that they haven't fired him, because he's been around forever. And I feel if there was a group that didn't like what he was doing, they would have got rid of him by now. So he must be doing something right to stick around this long.
Yeah, I was just thinking of how, looking at the tenure of Roger Goodell or the NBA, I know they switched from David Stern to Adam Silver in the last few years, but how in the time that Bettman's been the commissioner of the NHL, how much the NFL and NBA have grown, where it seems like hockey has not at all been on that type of trajectory.
Yeah, it's only recently really where I think hockey is starting to get that momentum to grow. And with Bettman getting older, I don't know if that means new change of leadership is going to come in, but obviously he must be doing something right in the eyes of the owners.
All right, enough on the commish. Want to run us through the draft, Troy?
Sure. So we had big surprise, the number one pick, the Canadiens. I thought Shane Wright was going to be the pick. A lot of consensus was it was going to be Shane Wright, but actually it was Slovakian Yuri Slafkovsky. I hope I got his name right. I have been dreading saying it for a long time, but I had to look up the pronunciation. But big Slovakian kid, and he went number one. And when you look at some of the more prominent pundits, they were kind of seeing the tide turn that he might be the number one pick.
Yeah, I think you were hearing that a little bit into the week leading up to the draft. To me, what's most interesting about Slafkovsky going number one is, okay, so the first thing I'll say is any guy that's drafted, if they come out of the gates and start the season on fire, the hobby's going to respond and their values are going to go up. But I think because Slafkovsky was drafted by Montreal, there's going to be a lot of excitement heading up to the season, and we'll see some pretty strong pricing right out of the gate. Had he been taken by Arizona, would people even care? Or would he have the same amount of hype? What do you think?
Yeah, good point. And another thing, too, is we don't know when these guys are going to play. Obviously, a lot of people expect them to play next year, but sometimes these top 5 to 10 draft picks, sometimes they don't play right away in the NHL. We've seen a trend of a lot of them playing in the NHL, but sometimes they don't. So, but he seems like he has all the tools to do it.
Sure.
And so let's go on to the next pick. Number 2 was another Slovakian. I'm going to give either Simon or Simone Nimek. He was taken by number 2. And I think the key of this is you had 2 Slovakians taken in the first 2 picks, which is kind of huge. It just shows the talent pool is growing. It's not always Canadians and USA players being taken or Swedes, Finns. You had 2 Slovakians at the top, so I thought that was really, really cool.
My takeaway on Nemec was the look on the Devils fans' faces when he was drafted was priceless. They were not, at least the crowd was not loving it.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely a good point. The third pick, Logan Cooley, so our first USA player, taken third by the Coyotes. I am excited for Logan Cooley, and actually we are excited because he will be a Gopher next year, so we get to watch him at the University of Minnesota, hopefully. I'm assuming he might be a one-and-done player, but we will see. Arizona doesn't do a lot for me, and that's kind of disappointing, but that's where he's ending up, so I guess we'll see how he does there.
So I guess, so now part of my ignorance on the one-and-done concept in hockey, but what I think that means, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is he'll play through the college season, and there's a chance that he could be called up to the NHL towards the end of the next NHL season. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then sometimes players just straight out sign during their college year and leave. The Gophers had that happen with the goalie this year. Now, I don't know if...
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he was a freshman. I don't know the rules about what age and what year you are in school, but it seems... The push now is play 1 year of college and then maybe go to the NHL. Or if you do play more than 1 year in college, you might leave during the middle of the season if it makes business sense for you, your family. And most, I think, college coaches, while they don't like it, they understand it.
And then I think about, too, from the Arizona perspective, they seem to be just amassing young players. And at some point, I feel like a couple of them will have to work out a little bit. I think of the hockey cards, and there's 400,000 Coyote Young Guns in the last 2 years that are all worth about $3, right? And so maybe that's a naive way to look at that, but it's be curious for me to follow which one of these guys really breaks through and establishes themselves as someone that can competently lead an NHL team.
Definitely. It'll be exciting to see. As you said, Yotes have a lot of young prospects on their team. Let's move on. Number 4 pick. Here it is, Shane Wright. So personally, I'm excited because, like I told you, Josh, I believe this is the start of the Shane Wright FU Montreal tour. I think he's going to have a tremendous chip on his shoulder. He'll be wanting to be out there to prove Montreal was wrong, and even the other teams that passed on him made a huge mistake. He was one of the guys that quoted as saying that he wanted to be the number 1 pick, and it didn't happen. It's just how it worked out. And then when he got up on stage, when he was drafted by the Kraken, and you can look into this a million ways, but the way they cut the video, it sure did look like he was staring daggers at that Montreal Canadiens table. Personally, I loved it, and I can't wait for more of it.
Yeah, high drama. So for a split second, you got me really excited with a chip on his shoulder. I thought for a second he might be able to go get our boy Kaprizov out of Russia.
Oh, Kaprizov, out of the gulags, man. We got to make a rescue mission on him. We'll get to him in a little bit.
No, I actually think it's a good situation all in all. I'm sure, again, he's not real happy about how it turned out. But you have a new franchise in Seattle. It's a really good sports market. I think hockey ultimately will do very well there. And for them to get a high-profile player, it just feels like everything fit where it ultimately should have. I don't know if you saw this too. Did you see that Gretzky called him?
I did see that.
Yeah, so there's more fuel to the fire on the chip on the shoulder, where I think Gretzky relayed that he went undrafted, had to play in the WHL till they merged, and just gave him some words of encouragement that way. So ultimately, whether you're drafted 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, the only thing that matters is how you play and perform. And from his or from any of these guys' careers and from the hobby perspective, that's really what it's going to boil down to.
I'm excited to watch his career. I think this just adds to the drama, the intrigue. Next topic, kind of looking at the draft. I kind of mentioned this before, but NHL, ESPN, I believe they had to kind of love what was going on. Your number 1 pick falling to number 4. Twitter kind of blew up. News stories. You're seeing all this stuff about the drama and the Slovakians being picked 1, 2. I thought it was just great TV. And I thought it was a really well done draft production, and it was a great atmosphere. I was really impressed with it, and I'm excited for the future drafts if we can keep this up.
Yeah, they had the perfect storm. They had draft intrigue, and I know our next topic, which we'll get into, is they had some really significant trades that not only impacted the draft, but a number of teams that could contend for playoff spots next year, and you had some big names moving. And again, so I think that created a real great situation for drama and intrigue, which is what sells sports.
Definitely. So speaking of those trades, we thought we'd cover a couple of them, that draft day trades. So the big one, in my eyes, was Alex DeBrincat being traded to the Ottawa Senators. This was kind of surprising, but not surprising, I guess. I mean, we know Chicago is rebuilding. I didn't think they got that much in return for him. He's a 40-goal scorer, and they got 2 picks in this, what we were calling a weak draft, and then Ottawa's 3rd-round pick in 2024. To me, maybe not the greatest return, but we also knew Chicago was kind of looking at selling, rebuilding, and to get draft picks.
I think the most interesting thing about this is ultimately what's going to happen with Taves and Patrick Kane, right? Because if you're going to trade away young, emerging talent, why would you keep guys that are great players but near the tail end of their career?
So looking at DeBrincat, actually from a hobby perspective, his 2017 PSA 10 Young Guns was around $187 on July 3rd, and it went to around $204, NHL draft night and the day after, so a 9% increase. And I looked this up using, card letter value. There weren't a lot of sales, though, tracked. So I don't know if this can really be called a sustained increase. It was just a couple sales. But it's interesting to see, and it will be interesting to see if this holds up. Personally, I don't think it will. It might just trend right back down to where it was. And full disclosure, I actually own a DeBrincat Young Guns PSA 10, which I got right around that price at $190. I bought it, I don't know, a while ago. So it was interesting, that little movement. But my thought is it's not going to stay at that 9 to 10% increase. And if it does increase, it'll be because the season started and he does well.
Well, he didn't go to one of the 6 or 8 teams that you would have had people going bananas over his card, right? If he was traded to Toronto, I think the price increase would have been a lot more significant than going to, and no slight against the Senators, but they're very much in the same boat as our favorite team, the Wild, right? It's very much a regional fan base, not the real rabid large fan, teams that have the real rabid large fan bases. So ultimately, I think his value is going to come down to A, how he plays, and B, if now the collection of pretty significant young talent that the Ottawa has amassed, if they can put it together and perform well as a team next year too.
Yeah, those are definitely great points. And the second trade we kind of wanted to look at, again, Montreal was involved. Montreal trading Alexander Romanov to the Islanders for the 13th pick, and then taking that 13th pick and trading it to Chicago for Kirby Dach. This one it's surprising more the fact that Chicago seems like they're giving up on Kirby Dach. I mean, he was 21 years old. He's still super young, but this trade seems pretty telling that they don't think he could offer much going forward, or maybe they think he's going to be too high priced. They're rebuilding. It just seemed like me it's very soon to give up on him.
Yeah, not being a major Blackhawks fan, so admittedly not reading all the blogs or news stories, it is just from, I guess, an outside perspective, it's a little puzzling to try to figure out what exactly their strategy is. I don't know. Have you seen anything, Troy, that points to what the purpose of all this is?
So if I'm going to be, I don't know what you want to call this. It could be that they're already in the running for the Connor Bedard sweepstakes for next year. He's pretty much already the consensus number one. He's number one draft pick. He is one of those. They're calling him one of those generational. He's going to be a really good talent. And I think if you're going to look at this with a skeptical eye, maybe Chicago's positioning themselves for that number one pick of next year.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough sell to your fan base to say that we're just going to give up on the next season in July, essentially. The other interesting thing about these two trades that I've observed, and I'm curious if you've seen similar posts and sales, it seems like there's a lot of Blackhawks collectors that are trying to offload their DeBrincat and Doc cards, and really nice ones too, like patch autos and things like that. So I took that, and I think they're doing it just more so out of disgust for the franchise and not being super big fans of the trades.
For sure. And if you look at the value or how the hobby responded to Kirby Dach being traded, his 2019 Young Guns went from a pre-draft day trade value of around $68 to now it's at $185 with a couple sales in that range. So 172% increase. So if you are going to unload, even if it's out of spite, it was actually a good time to try to unload that card.
Yeah, that's crazy. Does Romanov going to the Islanders do anything for you?
I just don't know him well enough. I didn't. When the trade was announced, I was more focused on the Kirby Dach, not the Romanov piece, because
it felt like to me too maybe a nice piece from a hockey perspective, but from a hobby perspective, I don't know if it's real significant.
Okay, any other things, Josh, on the draft, or are you ready to move on to our, I don't know how to take this next topic, but I thought I'd let you have a chance if there's anything else you want to add on the draft.
Well, my boy Jaeger went to the Kraken.
Oh, there you go. Our boy Jaeger,
I don't care. He's got the best name in hockey, and sign me up. I'll pre-buy his Future Watch auto immediately.
Nice. Love it. All right, let's focus on NHL player news, and holy cow, Kaprizov. We were kind of talking, and one thing I just want to say is oof, or a very heavy sigh. So if you didn't hear what was going on with Kaprizov, news broke Wednesday, the 6th of July, that Kaprizov was wanted in Russia for allegedly buying a falsified military ID card in 2017. Very interesting topic, and I think this really got people really, really nervous once, you realize that the Flyers had a goalie prospect, Ivan, I'm going to get his last name wrong, Fedotov, who was arrested and taken to a military naval camp for evading his military service. So I think once the rumors started coming out about this Kaprizov story, it just, and then you read that, it's like, oh no, what is going on? Personally, I'm in panic mode, and I'm very worried about what's going on. I don't know, Josh, if you're feeling a little bit different than me, but I just kind of shake my head.
Well, okay, so this is where we have an opportunity to, and I'm sure we'll do this a bunch, but to give the Minnesota sports fan perspective. And honestly, it's the most Minnesota sports thing ever. This is what happens. We have had, after the North Stars left, right, we had a number of years without a team. We get the Wild back. It's been 25 years. We've packed the stadium. We've had okay players, some good players, some maybe better than average, you would call it, right? You had Gaborik and Preezy and Suter were fine for a while, and Brent Burns, I guess, till we traded him away. And Troy and I used to have season tickets for a number of years, and we would come in and go to games, and the Blackhawks would come, and you'd watch Patrick Kane skate around everyone, and then Crosby would come in, and Ovechkin, or even Tarasenko from the Blues, I remember. And we never had a guy that struck fear in the hearts of the opposing team's fans, and we finally got one. We finally have a superstar. And of course, this happened. Like I said, it's the most Minnesota sports thing ever. Why wouldn't this happen to us at this point?
Yeah, definitely, that story happens, but then you get the second part of the story where he was denied entry into the U.S., per reports, trying to come through Dubai, come through via the Caribbean. So 2 different spots, he can't get in. I don't know. I know, I guess we're not experts in this, but it's really concerning. We've heard there's been articles written about these Russian players. Maybe they shouldn't go back to Russia because there's just too much political stuff going on that maybe they won't be allowed back. I don't know the whole story, but I'm panicked. It doesn't look good. We're, at a personal level, worried about Kaprizov and his family and make sure everything's okay with him. But it's one of those situations, kind of weird. I don't know what's going on.
I think that the timing aspect of this is a little bit interesting too. So on one hand, right, you can say, okay, this happens in July. It's better than this news to break in October. So looking at the optimistic side, there should be plenty of time to hopefully sort this out and get him here soon, right? That's, I think, what everyone hopes. And obviously, like you said, safety and happiness for him and his family. But the other kind of interesting thing about the timing from a hobby perspective is it coincided almost perfectly with the release of SP Authentic, right? So you have the top card in the entire set and the number 1 chase, which I don't think it doesn't look like it's affected people's interest in ripping or, buying personal boxes or participating in breaks. But I have thought, and I've even thought from my own perspective, let's say one of the out of 100 Future Watch auto patches goes up on eBay for $5,000 and I had the money to buy that card. Would you think twice at this point, knowing that it's like, is this dude going to be in the gulag 4 months from now instead of the X?
I want to say it's definitely something that crosses your mind.
Yeah, and I don't think it's affected his pricing so much in the short term, but and this is where the timing lining up with the SPA release probably helps his pricing because he is the number 1 chase. And as it is the Future Watch Auto is in of itself is a great looking card. But for the big picture for me, I'm really nervous about this. And the number 1 reason is I feel like the news has been very quiet. One of the luxuries we have as Wild fans, and people may argue this, this is a very subjective opinion, but I feel like we have probably the best hockey writer in the country, and Michael Russo, who gets all the information, has a very good relationship with the team, is very active on Twitter, and he's been just a lot quieter than I would have thought, which I'm reading, and may be wrong, as that there's a very serious situation.
Agree. And, you kind of mentioned the values of Kaprizov and just quickly his Young Guns 2020 PSA 10. It's slowly been trending downward, and it's trending right where it's been on its downward trend. So this news didn't cause a huge drop or anything. So I thought we'd put that out there. Finally, the last couple of days, Ottawa traded Matt Murray to the Maple Leafs. Josh, I don't know how you think about this. Matt Murray's one of those goalies to me. I know about him. He's kind of on the peripheral, that middle ground. Nothing here really excites me. I'm assuming that the angle here is he's going to Toronto, so a huge collecting market.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting too, when we were looking into this a little bit this morning, so for everyone knows it's the 12th of July, and it was a little puzzling because their backup goalie was a rookie this year. And, given the moves that they're making to get to Brinkat, it's like, do you really want to put the number 1 goaltender on Gustafsson? And what it turns out is that this was really looks like a table setting move, where the other, I guess, side of the story here is, and this came out just really 2 hours ago, maybe at this point, or 2.5 hours ago, that they made a secondary move in trading with our team again, the Wild, for Cam Talbot and exchanged Gustafsson. So I'm sure now Ottawa will be looking for a number 2 goalie, but they'll presumably have their number 1 goalie in Cam Talbot. And there was a little bit of it was really an untenable situation in Minnesota. So those of you that don't know, is Talbot was our number 1 goalie last year. Towards the end of probably was around the trade deadline, Troy, where they traded for Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yep.
And really split pretty evenly from there. But then in the playoffs, the Wild really gave every start to Fleury. And as you can imagine, didn't make Talbot real happy. And there had been some tie. And then the Wild re-signed Fleury. And I just don't think Bill Guerin, the GM of the Wild, wanted any drama. And so he, in the last couple of days, made up his mind to move Talbot. And so you have Murray now going from Ottawa to Montreal, or to Toronto, and then Talbot to Ottawa.
And, you say it didn't make Cam Talbot happy. It definitely also didn't make his wife very happy either, because she was very vocal on his situation with Minnesota. That's another thing. It seems like Guerin just doesn't take BS. So that kind of preceded the movement. But back to Murray. Little pricing info. His 2015 SP Authentic Future Watch Auto raw sold for $32 on June 1st, and after the trade announcement, looks like it has went up to about $70, so $119 increase. And like we said, it's going to that market, and
what's 119%?
The hobby reacted to. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I apologize. 119%, but yeah, the hobby definitely reacted to the news.
Well, and I think this is kind of rounding out this discussion. Let's go back to where we started with DeBrincat, right? He gets traded to Ottawa, and I think nobody could argue that he's a much more significant player than Murray is. And he has a very modest, 19% increase. And then on the flip side, you have Murray going to Toronto, and here you have the Maple Leafs bump, right? And his pricing skyrockets, right? So had DeBrincat gone to Toronto, I think his pricing would have exploded too.
So a lot of good NHL news, a lot of it kind of crazy. And if anyone is going to start a GoFundMe to go rescue Kaprizov, please let us know. We would both like to donate, send the rescue mission, and go get him.
Please.
So with that, let's keep going on. Let's take a quick look at free agency and what could play out there. So personally, Josh, I don't know how you feel, but looking at this whole free agency, the free agent pool, to me, it is not the most exciting free agent class we've seen. I went on the NHL.com and got their power ranking, the top 10s, and I just kind of read it, shook my head, didn't really do anything for me. But I do think it is important to look at the list. And so when announcements are made or we hear these names pop up in the news as free agency opens, we kind of know what's going on and who these players are. But I'm wondering, did the list do anything for you? Did it drive any excitement when you saw it?
Not really. I mean, I think Gaudreau is obviously, he had a really great year last year, and given his age, he's a little bit intriguing. But to me, the general takeaway is a lot of these guys are good to great players in their own right who have had good careers, but are really at the tail end of their careers. And so the question is going to be with all of them, they're going to be, I think because of that, risky signings in some cases, and just because you'll have to wonder what do they have left in the tank.
Yeah, definitely. And Gaudreau is definitely your number one available just from an offensive production standpoint. He had 40 goals, 115 points. He's right at that prime of his career usually when you hit 28 years old. So that's the interesting one. I'm curious to see where he ends up. The number 2 on the list was Philippe Forsberg. Now, obviously, he re-signed with Nashville. But a little bit about looking at his value, his 2013 Young Guns Raw sold for about $31 on July 12th. Towards the middle of June, this card was actually selling in the $20 range, so he's seen about a 50% increase over the past month. I'm not sure what that's attributable to. Maybe that he's going to keep playing, or I don't know. Maybe that Nashville re-signed him.
I don't know. Maybe it's just Predators fans. Yeah, sorry. Maybe it's just Predators fans that are just excited that they've locked him up for, it was like 8 years, right? Or a long-term deal. And that he's going to be around. And so, hey, now's a good time to invest in that card, knowing that he's going to be a Predator for really the most significant years of his career.
For sure. And then 3 and 4 to me, it's Kadri and Letang. So Kadri with the Avalanche and Letang with the Penguins. Again, these are little older players. Or actually, Letang re-signed with the Penguins. I forgot about that. Again, these two don't do anything for me from an excitement standpoint. I don't know, Josh, are you excited about them?
I don't think from a hobby perspective there's much where I think from a hockey perspective, if they go to the right team and can be that one last piece that puts that team kind of over the proverbial top, then that could be interesting. But at this point in their careers, I just don't know what they're going to do to really make that much of a significant impact hobby-wise.
The next one on my list that, he's number 5 on the power list, but he's a little intriguing just from who he is Evgeny Malkin from the Penguins. Now, again, he is getting older. He's on the tail end of his career, 35 years old. I'm interested to see where he goes. I don't know. It's again one of those things too. It maybe depends where he goes if it has any hobby effect. But he's one of those players, I've watched for a long time. He's on the downside of his career. And I hope he ends up at a good place because I've really enjoyed watching him play.
Yeah, I feel like a broken record, Troy, because I think that if he goes to one of the biggest markets, people would be pretty excited about that. Montreal or the Rangers or something like that, or Toronto. It would be weird if the Blackhawks signed him at this point. And he is leaving a big market in the Penguins. But if he signs with Nashville, I just don't. No, it just might be more seen as a money grab on the tail end of his career or something like that.
And the last player, I know, Josh, you have probably a better opinion on him than I do, is Valeri Nichushkin. I knew I'd mess it up.
Nichushkin?
Nichushkin. I cannot. My tongue doesn't work that way with the
Valeri Nichushkin.
So I forgot. So I figured I'd let you talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, I don't know. This one was interesting to me, primarily because of the team he plays for, his age. He's only 27. He should be entering the prime of his career. He had a respectable 52-point season last year. Obviously, the Avs won the Cup. He had a pretty good playoffs, so that helps. I guess maybe gave me the most interest is his pricing was honestly lower than I had expected. So when I looked up this morning his 2013 Future Watch Auto, which he was in the Dallas sweater at the time, it sold today for in the $40 range, which was up from this previous sale right on the 4th of July of 27. So a pretty healthy 48% bump after re-signing. And this is a case, so full disclosure, I did buy a Future Watch Auto today. I bought it for $35. And my thought process was, if he can take the next step and entering the prime of his careers and maybe get up into the 70, 80 point range, kind of like a Kevin Fiala last year, it may be too big of a jump to expect that this could be a card that I flip come November, December, January next year for a decent little, I mean, I don't think it's going to explode into but if I could get $100, $120 for it, if he plays real well, it was probably worth the gamble, knowing that at $35, if he regresses or plateaus and the team doesn't perform well, it's not that big of a risk.
Yeah, definitely. Good points on that. So that kind of, unless you have anything else, Josh, any other free agents, either ones that re-signed or ones that are still on the market, anyone else do anything for you?
No, the only other one that I might mention is Andrej Palat from the Lightning. And to me, I don't know. I can't really make I just don't think this is, I'm thinking more from the hobby perspective. He seems like a guy that shows up in the playoffs and performs real well, and I don't know how much regular season interest in collecting him there is. He's a little bit older at 31, but still probably at the tail end of his prime. So I think maybe in the perfect situation, that might be one to look at, but yeah, I don't know. And I honestly haven't looked into whether or not Tampa's intent on re-signing him or not. All right, Troy, that was a really great wrap-up of the draft and free agency and some impactful player news. At this point in the show, we're going to, in a second, play an interview we did, as Troy mentioned, in our game plan with Chris McGill, the co-founder of Card Ladder. It was a really amazing interview. We think you're going to like it. He had some great insight into the overall sports card market. Obviously, it's really uncertain times. And so we thought he was an important person to have on. And so we're going to go ahead and roll that interview now. All right, we are super excited to be joined by Chris McGill from Card Ladder. You guys have heard us talk about Card Ladder in just about every episode. And we're definitely going to give Chris an opportunity at the end of our conversation to give you guys a little bit better overview of what Card Ladder is. But just from, I guess, a 2-second overview, I'll probably butcher it, Chris, but it's a way to store and track your collection. And they have great data on as far as like values go, look at sales for comps and a whole bunch of other things. But like I said, Chris will do a great job of explaining what Card Ladder does. But hey, Chris, great to meet you and great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Congrats on the success of the podcast so far. And I'm a new follower of the hockey_cards_gong show Instagram accounts, and I'm really enjoying it. So thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, Chris, so I got a first question for you. Do you know the significance of the term gong show from a hockey perspective?
I know it has a meaning in context of hockey, but that's it. I don't know beyond that.
Okay, so a gong show, it can be used a couple of ways. The first is a hockey game that gets out of hand. So if you've ever watched hockey, and a lot of times, like let's say it's a 7-1 score, it might get a little feisty in the third period. They'll refer to that as a gong show. Okay. Or other times, like an after party, like when players would go out to a bar after a game or something like that. So we picked the name Gong Show because we try not to take ourselves too seriously and give us rope to not be perfect. But yeah.
I hear that as far as the after game Gong Show goes, no other professional athletes party quite as hard as the hockey players.
Very true. Very true. So like I mentioned, we're excited to have you on and really excited to talk about the hockey market in general. We'll start hopefully, or I guess at the big picture. I'm sure this is a question that you've been asked a lot over the last month or so, especially given a lot of the uncertain economic and geopolitical times that we're in. But what are your thoughts on the overall state and near future of the sports card market?
Yeah, great question. And the way I think about this is I've always felt that the success of the hobby and card collecting is predicated not on how well prices are doing in a short-term time horizon, but instead on whether or not people are enjoying the experience. And so I think there was a problem over the last 2 years where there was people who were being magnetized to the hobby, who were deriving their enjoyment of the hobby primarily from being able to make money, being able to buy, grade, raw cards, sell them, flip stuff, make smart investments that paid off in the short term. And there were people who they really got their enjoyment of the hobby was centered on that experience. And so, over the last year, there have been some risers, some fallers, but in the aggregate, things have been pretty flat. And, I think on average, people who have been investing and flipping over the last year have probably had mixed results, which is different from the 2020 and early part of 2021 experience. And so I think some people have left the hobby, quite frankly, in the recent past. People who they stopped enjoying it so much. But I think many more people who came into the hobby maybe over the last few years, maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, like myself, I came back to collecting in the summer of 2016. Those of us who were fortunate enough to be taught how to enjoy the hobby from the perspective of everything that it offers, from the perspective of friendships and community, from the perspective of all the interesting analytical things you can do by studying the market, which is, I think you guys like that stuff. I really like to do that stuff too. From the perspective of increasing the way we enjoy and watch and consume sports, and many more things. The thrill of getting a notification you have a saved search on eBay for a card you've been looking for, the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of finding deals, the joy of going to different shows, the fun of watching monster cards end at auction with the big auction houses. All those fun experiential parts of the hobby, like those of us who were taught to learn and love the hobby from that point of view, we're loving it right now. We're flourishing right now. Certain cards that maybe we thought we would never be able to get if price appreciation continued at the trajectory that was on over the last year to 2 years, now they feel within our grasp. We feel like new opportunities are opening up that we didn't know we would have. So that's my take on the state of the hobby right now, is that there's a segment of this hobby that is still learning to love and enjoy the hobby the way that others were fortunate enough to have been taught to love and learn it and learn about it and love it. And that's what happens in a mixed market. So let me pause there. But that's kind of where that's how I feel about the hobby right now. Is I feel like there's just a lot of learning and growing happening in this space right now.
I really appreciate that sentiment and agree with it wholeheartedly. We always tell people, collect what you love. If it does appreciate over time and becomes an asset, that's great. Like, I think everything in life, if you approach your sports card collecting or hockey card collecting, in our case, with a balanced approach, right? And you have a little bit of fan in you and just appreciation for cards or nostalgia to your youth, but also are interested from a market perspective, a little bit in values, and you want to make smart financial decisions and collect things that do have the chance to appreciate over time, that's probably the healthiest approach to collecting. And I think, like you said, there's probably a lot of people that throughout the pandemic saw sports cards as a get-rich-quick scheme and purely, got in to go snatch products at retail and flip them for ridiculous prices and so on and so forth. And maybe they've had a little bit of more stressful experience over the past year. But that being said, I do have a specific market question that I think I know the answer to, but I want to hear from your perspective. I think all that being said, is it safe to assume, though, that the market's not crashing?
Yeah, it is. And I guess it kind of also depends upon how we would define crash. Not to get too pedantic, sure. But because it's just funny, too, because it just went over pretty quietly. But the big rise and fall that happened in the iconic, super obvious investor grade cards, like your 86 Fleer Michael Jordan rookie in a PSA 9 or a PSA 10, or to keep this hockey related, the O-Pee-Chee Gretzky 79 in high grade. Those cards had a magnificent rise in price in the second quarter of 2021, and then quickly corrected in the second and third quarters of 2021, and have been stable ever since. They've been stable even as cryptocurrency markets have undergone, well, I think it's fair to use the word crash when Bitcoin is down 70% from its peak price. Same thing goes for the other lesser known altcoins. Other financial markets have taken 15-20% hits over the last year or so. Meanwhile, the consumer price index is indicating that inflation is happening at like an 8 to 9% rate year over year. So like lots of negative things happening in financial markets, you might say. And over that time, cards have been relatively flat. Now, it's difficult to measure, right? Because like, unlike investing in stocks and bonds, where diversification is an approach that's deployed by many account managers and self-guided investors. In cards, we don't really operate that way. We have niches. So like I have a few niches as a collector. You guys obviously are within the hockey category, and then probably have specific players and or specific eras and or specific grades and conditions that you like to focus on. And so it's really hard to say that there's a way to average or approximate the performance of sports cards, because there's so many different segments, so many different silos. There really is no average experience. Everyone's exposure is really different. And like, I'm not here as a collector saying, well, I need 10% allocation to hockey and 8% to baseball and 3% to soccer. No, I'm collecting the very best cards of my favorite players that I can get my hands on. That's the approach. So it's kind of hard to generalize about the hobby, but like using like the Card Ladder 50 index, there was a big rise and fall in Q1 and Q2 of 2021, and ever since there's been relative stability with some minor fluctuations here and there. So certainly there hasn't been any crash in my estimation over the last year or so looking at the CL50. But there certainly was in Q1 and Q2, just kind of noticing how that index like tripled from the winter of 2020 to the spring of 2021. Then it lost half its value, and then it's been really steady. So it's weird, man. We're in a very interesting and odd market right now.
Well, how I've kind of looked at it is in the spring of 2021, everything went up. Right. I mean, it was sports cards were gold or even trading card games. Right. And now it seems like to me that it's more pockets that you have to find, that if you're looking at the hobby from an investment perspective, you can't just buy any old card and assume it's going to go up anymore. You have to do more research. And that's where a tool like Card Ladder, and I know we'll get into it, has been really helpful. And you mentioned the Card Ladder 50 index. So for people that don't know, Card Ladder has a bunch of different indexes. The Card Ladder 50, you could describe better than me, but to me, it's more like the S&P 500, or tracks the biggest, most known, most valuable sports cards and from multiple sports and gauges their value over time. And that's one way to look at the market versus breaking it down between hockey or basketball or football or F1 racing or something like that. Is that a good way to put it, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. And so of the 50 cards, we tried to choose cards that have large market caps and cards that are obvious and iconic and that have the best chance of being recognized by the most people. So as far as like hockey is concerned, some of the hockey cards represented are like the 1979 O-Pee-Chee Gretzky in a grade of PSA 8. When we choose a grade like a PSA 8 so that we're getting pretty regular data points, that the population of that card is 773. We have, I believe we have Ovechkin's Young Guns in a PSA 10. We have Crosby's Young Guns in a PSA 10. Yeah, I mean, we don't have any like sick patch autos from the Cup or anything like that, right? Like and if we compose an index of cards like that, that index would be doing quite well because the high end and or the most rare and desirable cards consistently outpace the higher population, more iconic, but also more readily available type of cards. Like we have like the 66 Topps Bobby Orr in a PSA 6. This is the type of stuff that we threw in there with as Josh pointed out, like with the purpose of trying to capture something that can hopefully come close to approximating price appreciation of the sports card industry at large.
Yeah, and I suppose if you comprised your top 50 index out of the top 50 greatest sports cards, the obvious issue would be of those 50 cards, you may have 4 sales in a year. And so it'd be really hard to gauge how the value of that marketplace is moved, or that segment of the market.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but like something worth pointing out with the Card Ladder indexes is that we take certain precautions to make sure that the indexes don't get too distorted by those outlier, super rare, super high-end cards. So one of the ways we do that is like we have total market indexes. So like we have a hockey category total market index, but within the offering of hockey cards that are in Card Ladder that comprise that total market index, we have like sick cup RPAs from some of the all-time great players, but most of those will not show up in Card Ladder's hockey index because one of the requirements for a card to qualify for inclusion in the index is that it must have 2 sales in the last year and it must have 1 sale in the last 6 months. So outlier cards that set crazy prices when they come to market once every 3 years, those won't show up in a card ladder index. And so in depending upon how representative you think cards like that are of the state of a particular market, you might feel that the card ladder index understates how that category as a whole is doing. And on the other hand, if you feel like what the true snapshot of a market is cards that transact frequently and that have high populations and that are more accessible to people on lower budgets, then you'll probably feel like the card ladder indexes are telling the story right now. There's no way to please everybody.
Well, I think from a tracking the market value, hockey is actually set up pretty nicely in that the two most important cards for any player are their Young Guns, which is their rookie card, right, which would be equivalent to like a silver prism in basketball or football. And I think the pack odds are generally 1 out of 4 packs, and there's typically 50 rookies in a series. So it's not a common base card, but it's fairly common as well. It's definitely not short print. And so you get, again, this is the generally accepted main rookie card of a player. And so you get a lot of volume around that. And then the other more valuable card would be the Future Watch Auto. And because that's numbered to $9.99, again, I think we see more common sales of that. So with how your platform works, it's actually really nice from a hockey perspective because you have those two very important cards for every player that can be tracked and have enough data to make the output meaningful.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. I don't know quite how it's been working in hockey. I think the Young Guns have been doing pretty well from when I see sales coming in every night. But I can tell you that in basketball and in football, the Prism Silver and the Prism Base have taken a beating over the last year or so. And it's not because those cards are any less cool than they were before. It's just because they were almost singularly treated as the investment card of choice for a given player. And then over time, I think it became apparent that there were other really cool alternatives that were lower population, maybe that had better eye appeal or better aesthetics, and just conveyed more prestige on the collector who acquired them. I think that's why, silvers and base continue to kind of fall out of favor and hopefully reach a stability or a point of equilibrium where they're properly valued in the eyes of market participants relative to some of the other rare Prism color stuff.
So obviously, as we've kind of tracked your different market breakdowns, it's been impossible to not notice that over the last month and a half, a hockey card market has been one of the bright spots. Yeah, where we've seen basketball down, 6, maybe 7%, football at a similar stage. I think baseball's done a little bit better than that. But again, in comparing hockey to the major sports, it's been one of the few in the green or positive. Do you have any explanation for that or any insight as to why hockey is performing so well?
Yeah, right now? I can speculate about it. I don't want to create the impression that I've got all the answers or even the answer, but some of the things that I think about here are, number one, hockey has some very cool cards, and that might seem like really stupid and obvious, but like Upper Deck manufactures hockey cards and controls the license. And Upper Deck is one of the most beloved manufacturers and brands in the trading card industry, and it has been for a long time. And I think the consistency and the quality of the product and the loyalty that the NHL and Upper Deck have to each other just reflects really well on the hockey category. And I think even I've seen this happen with collectors who I know maybe from like Michael Jordan collecting or something like that. I've seen these guys venture into collecting hockey stuff, and some of them really got into the Fleer Retro PMGs and some of them
Yep.
really got into the cup and some of the sick patch autograph stuff that comes out of that product. And then there's a segment of people who just who just I can speak to this myself as a collector. Taking a chance on collecting certain players, or like I became a full blown fan of the modern NBA because Christina, who works with me on Card Ladder, is my fiance and a fellow collector. Because she and I just decided in the year 2018 that we wanted to start messing around with modern basketball products, and we did. And then we took an interest in the key rookies, and all of a sudden now got NBA League Pass, and I'm watching hundreds of games a year, and I'm just totally obsessed with it. It's like the hobby recruited me into being a huge fan of the modern iteration of basketball. And I think there's something desirable and fun about hockey culture, about hockey fandom, about there's a fascination with the sport itself. It kind of feels like the sport might be a little underrated, might be a little underrepresented in North American culture. And I think people like that. I know some subset of people have taken a chance on hockey cards, and all of a sudden now they're full-blown hockey viewers and supporters of the sport. So I think there's a perfect storm of a lot of those types of factors.
Totally agree with you, and I want to echo your point on the coolness of the cards, and especially going to cup patches. I think one of the unique aspects of hockey is their jerseys have more going on. I don't know if that's the best way to say, but if you look at like a Blackhawks player, there could be 6 or 7 colors in one patch. Where like an NBA jersey tends to be a little bit more plain, in especially if it's a patch of the name or number, where you maybe 2-3 colors. And so I think that's one way hockey stands out. And another aspect that we think is really important for the growth of the sport, as we've talked with, and this is, I guess, maybe us selling you on hockey a little bit, maybe you'll start collecting more, is a huge thing happened this year in the sport, in that it's the first year in about 15 now where hockey was put back on a national TV schedule. So a year ago, to watch a hockey game, you had to have a cable subscription, number one, which hardly anybody has, and they had it buried on like the NBC College Outdoor Hunting Channel. And that just doesn't do a lot to expose the game, especially to young people that might be interested in learning the players and the teams and wanting to collect. But now, by putting the games on ESPN and TNT, they've had a studio crew on the TNT side, well, on both, but especially on TNT, they're trying to mimic a little bit what they do with inside the NBA. And I think that just getting the exposure to the game will help be a catalyst for growth for the sport. Now, they need to figure out how to market their players a little bit better. That's something hockey's never done well.
Yeah, hockey's been
the personalities, the personality side. Take some lessons maybe from the NBA in that regard. But we really feel strongly that there's a lot of growth opportunity in the sport, and obviously it's been exciting for us to see that hockey's performed well over the last couple
and let me that's excellent. I have noticed that TNT has definitely been putting a spotlight on hockey. You know what else hockey has that I think makes it appealing too is there's a pretty clear-cut GOAT in the Great One. And he's got an iconic status, and he's sort of become, in the best way possible, a myth, a legend. Baseball, has Babe Ruth. Basketball has Michael Jordan. Hockey has Wayne Gretzky. And Gretzky's dominance as a hockey athlete, I'm in no way qualified to analyze it, but I've noticed and observed people who are qualified make the observation that he might be, relative to his sport, the GOAT of GOATs, or close to it. So that's something very appealing about hockey, is that for somebody who wants to jump in and collect the best player of all time, you can do it, and it's not too tricky. You don't have to get too far into the weeds and too far into debates to sort that out. And then the second piece of this is that you have active players, whether it's Ovechkin or up-and-coming younger guys like McJesus and now Cale Makar, who these guys are verging on doing historic things, and that's putting a spotlight back onto Gretzky, and it's making him relevant all over again, because anytime a young player does something great, it demands comparison to the measuring stick, which is the Gretzky. So I think that's a really interesting timeline in the history of hockey right now.
Have you seen the Cale Makar prices over the last 6 months?
Yes, I have. He's doing, his market is doing really well.
Well, and what's really fascinating, getting a little inside weeds for a second on hockey about Cale Makar, is, so maybe a comparison I would give you is, he's a defenseman, and traditionally defensemen in the hobby are valued like a running back. Well, I mean, maybe that's even Troy. I don't know if you're a defensive football player. They just haven't had a lot of value. Yeah. Other than Bobby Orr, who was considered the greatest, if you have Gretzky's obviously the GOAT of hockey, but from positionally, people would look at Bobby Orr, and primarily because he was very much an offensive defenseman. And the emergence of, and that's what's really, I think, led to the emergence of Cale Makar's values, is I don't want to get too deep into the comparison here, but he's a very similarly strong offensive game and very exciting game to watch. So that is potentially opening up a window in hockey where you have other now more offensive defensemen like an Adam Fox from the New York Rangers, or a couple of other guys that, point being, a year and a half ago, there wasn't a lot of money being put into NHL defensemen from a collecting value. And now he's kind of blown those doors wide open.
Yeah. So so that's interesting too. Cause the market is fluid, and everything that was true a year ago might not be true today in terms of collector preferences and priorities. And I see that across a number of sports.
Well, that's really amazing insight into the market. Before we do let you go, we wanted to give you a couple minutes to explain. I'm not sure how many people within the hockey collecting community were aware of Card Ladder. I think you guys are out there enough where people are becoming more and more aware of you every day. But just in case anyone wasn't familiar with your platform and what you're doing, we wanted to give you the chance to give the
I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me on. So for hockey collectors in particular, there's a couple of different ways to experience Card Ladder. One way for sure is just kind of using the indexes to get a snapshot of big picture. How is hockey doing compared to other categories? And that can be useful, just kind of to contextualize things. And the indexes are available for free. Just via cardladder.com, you can check out all the indexes on a daily basis and see how they're doing. The place where I think hockey collectors are going to be getting a lot of value out of Card Ladder is the sales history feature. So that feature in particular has over 40 million sales that are aggregated across, I think, 14 or 15 different marketplaces. So, and it's all time. So in the case of sales coming from heritage auctions or from PWCC or from Golden or from eBay or from MySlabs, it's going back as far as we possibly could go. So you're going to find sales going back to, in some cases, 2003, if obviously if the card was having sales happening back then. And for really rare, obscure cards, that can be helpful. That can be really helpful if you're trying to track down something, and it hasn't sold in the last 3 years. I don't know if you'd be able to find that data point in many places outside of Card Ladder sales history feature. So that the sales history feature can be really neat, and every day it dumps somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 new sales in. So from eBay, from marketplaces, when like last night, PWCC just had their weekly, so all those sales come in. So we grab a ton of data points and just kind of throw them into there. And when it comes to eBay sales, we grab the best offer accepted at the accurate price, not the list price. Okay. So the sales history feature is a really useful tool, but it's imperfect, right? There's no vetting going on. If somebody shill bids up an auction and it gets dumped into there, it's in there until somebody brings it to our attention. It's going to be in there. So that's just a word of caution when using that database, to just know that it's just raw data. It's just a pile of tens of millions of raw sales. But, that.
Yeah, the other problem we found when searching card history, and I have no idea why eBay doesn't force have a standard protocol for how you enter a card in. Like one of the, in hockey, one of the iconic brands that Upper Deck owns is OPC. There's technically it's O-PEE-CHEE, but people will list it as OPC or without the dashes, and so I'm sure that makes it a little more difficult.
Oh yeah, that is definitely frustrating. So, but sales history, the search bar, it uses Boolean search terms the same way that eBay does.
Oh.
So, if you wanted to create a Boolean search query that aggressively seeks out all those different variations of OPC, all you do is just open parentheses, put OPC, comma, O-P-Chi, comma, OPC with no spaces, and then end the parentheses, and it will conduct a search against each of those search terms. So that hopefully makes life a little bit easier. But yeah, I feel your pain, and that can definitely be an issue. And then the place where I think hockey collectors at this time are not going to get as much value out of Card Ladder, but they will in the future as we continue to expand our hockey database, is the ladder itself, which is too bad because that's a really one of the cooler features that we have. But the ladder right now has around 30,000 unique card profiles, and once a card gets a profile, that means a researcher takes over monitoring all future sales of this card, vetting them, looking for signs of shill bidding, so on and so forth. And so, like any card that's in an index of ours, it belongs to a researcher. That researcher is monitoring new sales of that card every day. And the card profiles are neat. They show a nice high quality scan of the card in question. So like if you're looking for cards, researching cards, you can take a good look at it. You get links to maybe Cardboard Connection or Trading Card Database. If the card is in PSA, you get a link to his population report. But even if it's not, you get the population number, so you can know what the pop is of each of those cards. So there's a lot of cool stuff that goes along with the card being in the ladder database itself. And we're working on growing that database every day. And being now a sister company to PSA and being part of Collectors Holdings, we're being given resources to continue to expand our database. And like our focus in the most recent past has been we've trained and brought in 2 new researchers who focus on TCG, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, stuff like that. There's a lot of collectors out there who are wanting and asking to see more of that. But we know there's a lot of hockey collectors out there too who want to see more from us. So, I invite your audience to please, come check out cardladder.com. There's a lot of free features. And then if you want to get behind the paywall and check out the sales history, use the collection tracking software, you get the full suite of features, then hey, we'd love to have you. And it's the cost of the service is $15 a month or $150 a year. But no matter how somebody gets value out of the service, I mean, makes me really proud to know that it's helping people enjoy their hobby a little bit more.
I think that's a great overview, and as Troy and I have said before, and we reference all the time, we do think it's a great service. We do use it just about every day, and think that you have a real unique perspective on the overall sports card marketplace, and for that reason, we were really thrilled and hey,
thanks for having me, guys. I'd love to come back anytime and keep going. I'd love to see the momentum and the content that you guys have been cranking out here. You guys are like the Cale Makar market here in podcast world.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Well,
that's a great way to end. Whenever I'm having a bad day, I'm just going to hit you up to give me a compliment because that's about as good as it gets. Well, thank you, Chris, so much. And we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. All right, that was our interview with Chris McGill from Card Ladder. Hope you all enjoyed it and found it informative. And much thanks to you, Chris, again, for taking the time to join us. But from here, we wanted to roll into a little bit of hobby news. There isn't much other than a big piece of news that we're a couple weeks away from the National, the premier sports trading card show and expo here in the United States. Unfortunately, we won't be making it this year to the National. Responsibilities, careers, life, kids have sort of gotten in the way there. But we do hopefully plan to make it to the Expo in Toronto in November. And so we're working towards that and looking forward to the opportunity to meet a lot of you guys there. I did want to bring it up, though, Troy, because I am curious, given how well the hockey card market is currently performing. I think it's going to be really fascinating to get feedback on just pricing and how many tables or vendors are selling hockey at the National. But again, what prices are going for. Is it strong? Is it weak? I'll just be really curious. I guess I've got my fingers crossed that there will be a little bit more interest this year in hockey at the National. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. The interest is what I would be really curious to hear from our listeners that go to the show. Are they seeing a lot of hockey in tables or vendors? Do they have a case or a cabinet with hockey? That would be really intriguing to me, because Josh and I have been to card shows locally around the Minneapolis area, and for being in the state of hockey, at times it feels like hockey just isn't that big at these shows. So I'm curious, now you get the National, the biggest one in the United States, or probably the biggest one, I don't know if it's in the world, for sports cards and collectibles. How's the hockey, environment there? That would be really, really curious to hear from listeners that go to the show what they see.
Yeah, so if anyone goes, please give us your feedback. Probably the best way to do that would be via Instagram at hockey_cards_gong show is our account. Just go ahead and message us. And we do want to hear from everyone, but I'm really fascinated to hear from people that have been there multiple years, and for a little bit of a compare and contrast to, is there any sort of anecdotal even feedback that you can kind of perceive growth in the hockey card market, at least as represented at the National. So I just wanted to bring that up. The other kind of note that I think is important to make hobby-wise around the National is, don't freak out if you're a seller and sales start to drop a little bit over the next couple weeks. I think traditionally buyers sort of stockpile their war chest a little bit for the National, and it's very common to see a little bit of decrease in the volume of sales leading up to it. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, and I'm actually curious just watching people I know or some of the stuff I have on sale on eBay and see if there is kind of a real slow trend or it's slowing down, which I'm assuming is going to happen from evidence in the past. So yeah, definitely don't freak out if you have stuff, you're a seller, it's not selling like you think it should be. The National is a huge thing, and a lot of people are going to be there.
Okay, let's roll into new releases quick. There isn't a ton going on this week from a new release perspective. Series 2 retail tin boxes do release today, as in July 13, if the day this episode releases. It's not a huge deal. There is one exclusive to the tin, and that is the OPG Glossy Rookies, much like Series 1. So if that is a chase of yours, that might be a good reason for you to purchase the tin. But like I said, I don't think it's a huge deal. You do get one extra pack that has the 3 glossy cards. Occasionally there'll be a parallel to one of the glossies as well, so a little bit more of a chase there. But since really that's the only thing going on, thought I would mention it. The other thing I wanted to talk about, a little more big picture in new releases, is both Troy and I have observed a ton of confusion, and a rightful confusion, over what's next as far as new releases go. If you look at the release calendars on whether you like to use like David Adams or Steel City or Blowout, what you'll see right now is there's really nothing in the next week or two. And you'll either see a log pile of products like Black Diamond and Allure and OPG Platinum and Clear Cut and Artifacts that are either marked as July 27 or July to be determined. Now, I think I can fairly confidently say, first of all, I don't have direct firsthand information, but Upper Deck's not releasing 5 products on July 27th. We have had a little bit of communication with Upper Deck. We're trying to get them on a subsequent show. They didn't share any specific information with us, but I did get the sense from them that, it is a fluid situation they're trying to work through. their release issues. And so I think the important takeaway is I just don't believe, and this is my perspective, and I'll be curious to see if you agree with me or not, Troy, that we're not going to have 5 or 6 products released a couple of weeks from now on the 27th.
I agree 100%. Just look how companies release products. You usually don't just dump them all, especially in a card market or a sports card market. Look at all the, Upper Deck's actually done a good job with kind of spacing out, Series 1, Series 2, and then we got SP Authentic, and look at all the hype. Those new products come out and it's all people are talking about. All you see being breaked on Whatnot or all the apps, these people are breaking on, but there's no way they're just going to dump 5 new products into the market. I can't see that happening. That would be that would flood the market and just create a lot of confusion.
So anyone that's like us and is really interested in wants to be in the know as to when new products are coming out, there is one little tip that I can give you, in that what I've noticed is right with it like a week or 4 or 5 days before a product goes out is Upper Deck will typically release the checklist. So if you're buying a pre-sale product or you're looking at a pre-sale and it says July 27th and go and you search and there's no checklist published, I would put that in, very suspect category and not have a lot of confidence in the date. If there is, so let's say hypothetically, this is not the case, but I just want to make an example. Let's say Allure on David Adams and Blowout said July 18th, so 5 or 6 days from now. And we had Beckett publishing the checklist, or Trading Card Database or Cardboard Connection had published the checklist today. Then you can almost take it to the bank that product would release within a day or two of when the online retailers are saying that it's going to be released. I don't know. Have you noticed that too, Troy?
Yeah, for sure. It seems like the one telltale sign we've found that can kind of give a hint of when something's coming out. Because again, those placeholder dates and not getting, there's not a list on Upper Deck's website or anything saying when stuff is being released. So it seems like the checklist being released is the key tip off right now on when a product is coming out.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is like me totally putting on a speculation hat. Again, zero firsthand knowledge. So I want to be very clear. My gut is telling me, Troy, that it's going to be Allure. And I felt like that for a couple weeks, that it just seems to make the most sense to me for Allure to come out next, right? Where you would balance having one of your mid to high end products in SP Authentic. And I wouldn't see you rolling into Black Diamond as an example, or Clear Cut right after. It seems like that the logical sort of balance to that would be to come out with the Lure, which I would think then OPG Platinum would then fall into August. But that's just me maybe making things up.
No, it's a good argument. I don't have anything against that. I want to know when the cup's coming out.
If the cup's coming out? So again, we're going to keep talking about this because like I've said, we've noticed a ton of confusion, and it's rightful confusion. There's people that are convinced that 5 products are coming out on the 27th. And that, I guess if there's one thing that I personally feel strongly about, is that I just don't see that happening. So like I said, we check multiple times a day, and you guys will be the first to know via the podcast here or via Instagram or any of our other socials. Once we find out, we'll be sure to communicate to you what the plan from Upper Deck is. All right. We've rolled through a ton of information today, but we can't end the show without going through some personal pickups. So Troy, I'm going to hand the conch to you to roll through your pickups for the week.
Definitely. So my first pickup was a 2020-21 SP Authentic. Surprise, surprise, Pekka Rinne. It's the 2000-2001 retro autograph card, serial numbered out of 199. It's a really cool picture. It's like kind of from a far camera angle. You can tell the camera is far away, but it's kind of zoomed in, and he's in a really nice pose. It's got an auto on it. I thought it looked really, really cool. So bought that, and that was the only actual card, single card I bought. I did participate in a couple SP Authentic, Stature, Upper Deck Series 2 hobby box breaks that were going on, just to put some money in that and just have some fun hanging out, talking about cards and watching people rip boxes. So I didn't get anything huge. I did get like a fluorescence and some other cool inserts, but nothing really big.
Okay. Yeah, I had a little bit bigger week. I made a couple pickups, and two of them really fall under a theme that I've been thinking about a little bit more from an investment perspective. And I think that everyone would agree that Series 2 has been a pretty big success, at least relatively. Mm-hmm. There's been a ton of interest. There's a ton of great cards. People seem to be happier with the quality of the cards. And you have Sider and Raymond and Mercer and McTavish and I think a little bit better inserts, no Hundo P, than Series 1. And so it got me thinking a little bit with all the excitement and interest in Series 2 is the shine faded a little bit on some of the Series 1 rookies who haven't played in a while, again, weren't in Series 2 and are not sort of the flavor of the day. And I feel like I'm Troy because I kind of honed in on a couple goalies. I did get a Spencer Knight Young Guns and a Swayman Young Guns. I think I got pretty good deals on them. Both were under $20. And then going back to last year, I did also pick up a French variation of Ilya Sorokin, which I think I got for $22. So I thought, and really I credit you for that, Troy, in some of what I've learned from you and the research you've done and some of the comparisons that you did between Shesterkin and Sorokin and Swayman and your belief that Sorokin really has what it takes to be a top goalie in the league. And so I thought those were pretty good deals. On the ripping and breaking side, I did open a Series 2 Mega and got a Lucas Raymond Young Guns, so that was kind of cool. And then from a breaking perspective, nothing, kind of like you, nothing great. The only interest, well, I don't know. I did get a Nolan Foote Ultimate Collection rookie. It was a napkin patch jersey. No auto. I think it's numbered, but not super exciting, but I think it paid for the break. So there you go. All right, guys. Well, that is our show for the week. Once again, we want to end or start our wrap up by thanking everyone profusely for the support and engagement on our Instagram channel in particular. The interest in the podcast is growing every week. We continue to be shocked and blown away by how the hockey card community has responded to our little show. And so from the bottom of our hearts, you have all of our gratitude, and we're going to work really hard to produce better and better content for you guys and hopefully help to make your collecting experience a little bit better and grow the hobby. That's really our goal. If you're not following us already on Instagram, again, it's hockey_gong show or hockey_cards_gong show. We do have a Facebook group as well. We hope that you'll follow us there. And thank you so much. And we are looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week, guys.